Unit 7.3 video lesson. Today we are talking about factoring trinomials. So everything that we've done with GCF and grouping has really been working towards this method of factoring. So a trinomial is going to have three terms, okay? The coefficients are going to be referred to as A, B, and C. So a trinomial is typically in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay? So A is the coefficient that goes with x squared, B is the coefficient that goes with x, and C is really a constant term. So it's important that we can identify the A, B, and C values of a trinomial, because like I said, those are going to be what we use to factor, and if we identify them incorrectly, it's going to affect the setup of our problem. So for our first expression, 3x squared plus 17x minus 10, we want to identify the A, B, and C values. So A is 3, because that goes with x squared. B is 17, that goes with your x term. And C is negative 10, so you always want to make sure that you take the sign with it. So real quick, pause your video and try and do A, B, and C for the second trinomial. Hopefully you have A equals 1, B equals negative 2, and C equals 9. Okay, really putting our understanding of this to the test with our third example, x squared minus 6. So you'll notice that we are now down to two terms, but be careful how you identify which coefficient is which. So A is 1, B is 0. There is no x to the first power term. And C is negative 6. So just because negative 6 appears as the second term in the expression, that does not make it B. So that is a very important distinction to make. The method that we're going to use in order to factor trinomials is called magic. Sometimes I call it big X, okay? But magic is just an acronym for the steps. So the first thing we're going to do is multiply. So we're going to identify our A and C values and we're going to multiply them together. We're then going to add. So we're looking for what two numbers add to get the B value. 3 is group. So we're going to split our B into these two numbers that we've identified. And now we're going to have a 4-term problem, and we're going to do some grouping. So grouping would then tell me to identify the GCF in each parenthesis and take out the greatest common factor. Okay, so our method for factoring trinomials we call magic. These are your steps. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples now. Okay, so I use one of the reasons that the alternate name I use for this is big X is because I use an X to organize the information for my problem. So on the top is where I place my A times C, and on the bottom is where I put my B. So A times C is 1 times 16, so that goes on the top, and B is going to go on the bottom. So we're looking for the two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to 10. So when you're thinking about this, okay, you can list the factors of 16 and then see if any of them add to 10. Okay, and we do have, there's only one pair of numbers. It would be 2 and 8. So I put those numbers on the two sides of my triangle, of my big X. Okay, so that was steps 1 and 2. We're now going to do G, group. So we're going to take 2 and 8, and we're going to replace the 10x with that. Okay, so that means that the two terms in the middle have the same variable that the 10x did. Right? And now this is just going to be a grouping problem. So you have already accomplished all of the new steps and skills that you need for today. Now it's grouping. We did this last time. We're going to take out our GCFs and finish out our problem. Okay, so we want to make sure we are showing all of the steps for grouping. That is my final answer. I could FOIL that and get back to x squared plus 10x plus 16, and I know that that would be the correct answer then. Let's try another one. Okay, so I'm going to make my big X. A times C on the top is -6, and B goes on the bottom. So the factors now, you're multiplying to -6. So -1, +6, 1, -6, okay, and so on. So those are all of my factors. And will any of those add to 5? -1 and +6 add to a +5. So -1 and 6, those are my two magic numbers. So I'm going to replace that term. I'm going to split it up so that I make a grouping problem. That's my goal here. I'm trying to create 4 terms to make a grouping problem. Oh, couldn't figure out what was wrong. Instead of a +5 on the end, this should be a -6. Okay, sorry about that. I just copied it down wrong. So my parentheses match. We'll take that out and finish our problem. Okay, and there we have our final answer. So it does become a little bit more tricky when one of the values in your big X is a negative. You have a couple more options for your factors, but the process stays the same. Okay? And the more of these problems that you do, the better you will get at identifying what those two numbers are supposed to be. Okay, so set up my big X. So A times C is 3 times 10. B is 11. Okay, so my factors of 30 and I'm looking for which one adds to 11. There will always only be one set of numbers that works. Okay, so you should never have to make a choice between, you know, two different options. Okay, Okay, and I haven't mentioned this before, but it doesn't matter what order you put the two terms on the inside, the problem will still come out correctly. All right, so now we just group. I'm going to take an x and a plus 2. All right, my parentheses match. Good for us. Final answer. Okay, hopefully with each problem that we're doing here, you're getting a little bit more fluid with the method. All right, pause your video and try and do this one on your own. So a times c is -10, b is -3. All right, so there are my options. Which one is going to add to a -3 though? That's the only choice. Okay, so hopefully you picked the correct factors. And group. All right, this first term is negative. Make sure you take that out with your GCF. Okay, you never want to lead the parenthesis with a negative. Okay, and there we go. That is our final answer. So hopefully you arrived at that same set of binomials as well. If not, go back and check your factors in your big X and then check your grouping. All right, so this one is a little bit more difficult now because you see we have two variables in our problem. Okay, we're going to set it up the same way though because the variables don't come into play for a couple steps. So in my big X, I'm going to do a times c, which is 1 times 18, and put b on the bottom. All right, so I'm looking for the factors of 18 that add to 11. Are you getting better at this where you maybe don't need to list out all of the factors? Okay, that could be a goal that you work towards. When we group now, we just want to make sure that our two middle terms follow the same variable as what we're replacing. So they should be 9QR and 2QR. I put little tails on my Q's since there is a 9 in the problem. We don't want to get confused. All right, but the first and the last term should then stay the same. And now we're just going to group. So we could take a Q from this guy and a 2R plus 2R. Always want to have that sign. All right, I did it correctly. My parentheses match. So I'll just take that out, Q plus 9R. So final answer. All right, so do not let this one throw you. If it has 3 terms, try and do big X. Try and use magic if there's 3 terms. It looks like a trinomial, even though it's not ax squared plus bx plus c. We can stretch the magic method to fit a couple outside types of problems. All right, so the very last thing we have to talk about here is incorporating greatest common factors into these. So remember, every time you start a problem, you technically want to check it for a GCF. Now, we were focusing on the magic method in our first few examples, which is why I didn't talk about it with you. But now that we have a better understanding of magic, we're going to put all of our knowledge together. So every time you start a factoring problem, your first step should be to check for a GCF, regardless of if it's going to be a grouping problem or a trinomial problem, or we'll see another method in a few days. Okay, you always want to see if there's a GCF first. So this happens to have a 2. Between 220 and 42, I can factor that out. Okay, so when that happens, you now want to take that GCF of 2 and you want to drop it all the way down to the bottom of your problem. Okay, so that you can now focus on just your trinomial, on your x squared plus 10x plus 21, because you're going to do magic now. Just because you took out a GCF doesn't mean you're done. You can use multiple methods to factor in the same problem. So we did GCF, we would then do magic to factor what's left inside the parenthesis. You always want to see what's left in case there's more to be done. Okay, so let's try one of these GCF problems. So I see that this all has an A in common. So before I do anything else, I'm going to take out an A. Also because looking at the problem, the way that it's currently given to me, it's not a trinomial. It's not ax squared plus bx plus c. It's a third power, which I cannot do magic on a third power. But when I take out that GCF, okay, drop it to the bottom just to get it out of the way so you don't forget about it, because it is part of your final answer. Because remember, when you go to FOIL and distribute, you still have to get back to that a cubed, and the only way to do it is to have a GCF as part of your final answer. So now we're going to do magic on just what's left inside the parentheses. So a times c is negative 54 and b is negative 3. So I'm looking at negative 9 and 6. Okay. All right, so the two parentheses that I'm going to get from magic, the a minus 9 and the a plus 6, are going to join that GCF that I brought down in the very first step for my final answer. Okay, so if ever you take out a GCF, it must be part of your final answer. All right, so that is everything that you need to know for magic. Okay, we're definitely going to be practicing this method. We're going to put all of our methods together so that we can identify, when to use which method, okay, when we're given a problem, because you may not always be told to use magic or that this is a trinomial and this is grouping. Okay, we're going to have to start to identify that for ourselves. So just make sure that all of your notes are complete. Write down any questions that you have. Okay, thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you next time.